Hello guys, welcome to episode 15. Not really sure what we're going to call it yet, but it's probably just going to be bits and bobs. There's a few jobs that I've been doing during this week, some in preparation for the mill turning up, which should be any day now according to the tracking sort of website. So that's coming shortly, and a few sort of bits and bobs that I've been doing around the shop, and then I'm in the middle of building the second bench, so we'll include some of that in this week's episode. I'm also in the middle of building a tailstock removal tool, if you want to call it that, for the lathe. So my tailstock, when I wind it all the way back, doesn't eject the Morse Taper, so you need a drift or something of that sort just to knock out the Morse Taper. So I'm just making something a bit more purpose built for that, because up to date, when I bought the lathe off the guy I bought it off, there's just a bit of bar stuck up the back that was sort of not particularly kind on your hands when you're using it, sort of sharp edges. So I'm just making something a bit better for that. I've spent a bit of time on the Taylor Hobson Pantograph engraving machine this week, just basically removing all of the duck oil that I put over it about 2 or 3 years ago, just to try and stop it rusting. So we've done all the top end of it, there's the bottom end still to do. So I'll run through a bit of that, that looks far better. So I'm just going to bring you in a bit closer to the bench and show you what I've been up to with one of the new arrivals that came this week, and it's all part of the sort of the organisation that I was doing in the previous video. So the new bench is a bit of a mess at the moment. 1 or 2 jobs on the go, so obviously there's a bit of stuff all over the bench, but not to worry. But this is one of the arrivals for this week that I ordered. So this is a Dymo marking machine. It's very good actually. It's about 20 something pounds, 25 pounds, something like that. Straight out the box, dead easy to use. I've sort of briefly read the instructions, but it's fairly self-explanatory. It's not easy. It's not difficult. Sorry, to sort of get to grips with how it all works. So I've been going a bit mad with it, and I'm sort of torn between. I've seen various people using these things, and they'll label everything up from the door on the way into the workshop, and light switch and things like that. I'm not going to those depths. I'm fairly sure I can sort of suss out what the light switch is and things like that. So, but what I have done is I've been through the sets of drawers that I put into the shop last week. So you can see there. So I've labelled up all of my taps. What I've also done, so up until the end of last week's episode, I'd only sorted out the metric taps and dies. I've now been back through my the rest of my taps that I've got, and I've now sorted out as best I can the imperial taps. So, and I've kind of done that with British Standard Whitworth taps across there, and then BSF taps there, and then I've got a collection of sort of UNC, BSP, BA, various other things. There's not enough of them to warrant individual drawers, so I've just kind of lumped all of those together. And then in this side, I've obviously labelled up all the cap heads, bolts, washers, pop rivets, things like that. So drawers of pop rivets. So that's all a lot neater and tidier. What I've also done, just because some of the boxes I can't see in, I've labelled up the end mills. So I've got some sort of names across the front there, just more so for the top boxes that I can't actually see what's in them. It just helps. I can read what's in there and just jump straight in and grab what I need. So that was that, and I've also, and I don't really need to do this, to be honest, but I have. Is it showing on there? There we go. I've also labelled up some of the drawers, and that's more so because it's a new toolbox, and I'm at the moment I'm just opening the wrong drawers all the time until I've got used to it. But once I've got sort of used to using this, there'll come a time when, but yeah, I don't really need to look at those anymore, because I'll know what's in which drawer. So that's that. In other news, what I've been up to this week, the vise that you saw me in bits last week, That's now had 2 coats of the blue paint, so that's all ready to be reassembled really, other than I've still got to do something with the main screw and the shaft. That just needs a bit of a wire brush and a clean up. So I might include some of that in this week's video in terms of just the rebuilding of that. I'm just leaving that at the moment because I want to get the second bench built first before I reassemble the vise, because as soon as I've got it reassembled I want to bolt it to the new bench. So I'll just move you again, apologies for any shaking. So you sort of join me in the middle of the bench build, the second bench build. So where are we with it? Well, I've screwed a batten to the wall. I've cut the bench top to size. So it's sat on the batten at the back at the minute, and I've just roughly clamped it to the original bench to get the height the same. So the next job now is the steel work. I've got some box section to cut and some angle line to cut on the saw, a bit of welding to do to weld those together, and then I'm just going to put, basically I'm going to put a long length of angle iron that runs the full length of the bench, not at the front, a little way back, and then at about sort of 8/10 of the length of the bench I'm going to drop a single 50 by 50 box section down to the floor, and that'll be welded to a bit more angle iron at the bottom with 2 holes in, and just bolt that so it can't move anywhere. So that's the rough plan for the bench. I've taken some rough measurements on the board there that I'm working to. So that's we're ready to start that in a moment. So that's kind of updates of where we're at. The only other thing I have done, and apologies I didn't film this, excuse me while I just walk in front of the camera, the DTI stand or scribing block on the surface plate, I've actually fixed that, and I really wished I'd filmed it because it went incredibly well. It's a very simple job really, but basically I cut the end off the bar that was slack. I measured up the hole. It's pretty much 1/4 inch. It was slightly under, so I got a 1/4 inch reamer and just ran a reamer through, just by hand, just a hand reamer. It took a very little scraping out of it really, but it just sized it at 1/4 inch. And then I've turned a 1/4 inch diameter on the bottom of the leg once I parted off the old piece that was undersized, and that's now, you know, it's a really good fit, really tight fit, but I can take it apart if I want to. And I've done some tests with the clock just on the top of this angle plate that I've got sitting on the surface plate here, and it's very good actually. It's very stable in both directions, so that tells me that the joint's good. So that's all operational now, so I've got that to use. I'll just spin you around and we'll just go and have a quick look at the engraving machine, the work that I've been doing on that, and one of the issues that I've come across with it, and some sort of future plans with the engraving machine. Okay, so we're here at the Taylor Hobson. You'll see, hopefully it looks a lot cleaner than it did on previous videos. So I've been through and just given it a good wipe over, general wipe over all over it, taking off all of the old duck oil that actually looked like rust. I thought it was very rusty, but it was just brown duck oil basically where it had dried out, and the duck oil had done a really good job. Once I'd wiped that off with a bit of degreaser, the actual steel surfaces underneath were very clean. So I've wiped all of the slideways, re-oiled them, got everything moving again, so it's all, you know, it's all very, very nice, very easy to move. Sorry you can't see that, I'll move this one instead. So you can see there it's all, you know, it's not taking a lot of force to move that. It's all very smooth, and a lot of that's because of the work I did 4 or 5 years ago when I first bought this and completely stripped it, cleaned everything right up, did some stone work on the slideways. I didn't do any scraping, and just generally gave it a really good thorough going over, and then rebuilt it and repainted it, and it's in good condition. One job I did have to do. So I've never really used this thing, you know, I cleaned it up and rebuilt it, but I've never used it in anger. And I thought, now I've got it to this point and I've got some room to move around it, we'll get it fixed up. So I got the rope basically attached to the motor and to the spindle, and we got it powered up. and I started trying to do some engraving, and it was all over the place. I couldn't control a straight line, and I'm scratching my head trying to work out what was going on. Two fundamental issues with it. When I rebuilt it, I think I got one of these units here that holds the pantograph, the parallelogram pantograph piece. I'd got that the wrong way round, one of them. I think it was this top one. And basically, when I was moving, excuse me, when I was moving in a straight line with the stylus at the back on the pantograph, I was actually moving in an arc with the spindle, which I couldn't sort of get my head around anyway. It was because I'd got one of these units the wrong way round, so we stripped that back down, spun it round, rebuilt it, and it's now functioning as it should do. The second issue that I've got is on the pantograph unit, and my camera just absolutely won't show it. But there's basically three settings that you've got on the head. I don't know whether it's best to. I'll take the camera off the tripod and we'll go handheld, and I'll just show you the three different areas where the settings, and show you what the issue was that I had with it and what I've done to come over it. So apologies for the handheld, guys, but I'll just run you through these three settings. So you can see on there, I can't go any closer because my camera just won't focus, but you can see there the whole head unit here will move backwards and forwards on the base casting, and you can just about see with my camera on this on here there's a series of markings, and these run from 2, 3, 4, and I think it goes 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and that's your ratio between you know what you've got on the copy plate up the top here and what you actually produce with the spindle and the cutter. So you set this to your desired ratio, and at the moment that's set on 6. You then set on one of these bars on the parallelogram piece, and I'm trying to it just won't focus, but there's a series of settings along here that have the same numbers on, so 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So you basically set the front edge of this piece to the same number that you've set on there, and then on the second arm of the parallelogram, which is this top one here, you have another set of the same numbers again. Now you can generally see the state of this top bar it's had much more corrosion. I would imagine at some point this has been stood, you know, where it's had water and moisture on the top of it, and I really couldn't see any markings on there at all. I really struggled, so I took it all apart, took it to the bench, got a magnifying glass out, and really went over it very, very sort of carefully, and gradually, with a bit of Scotch-Brite and sort of a lot of staring at it, I managed to suddenly, the numbers started to appear, and I could see where they were laid out. So what I've now done, and it's a bit sort of rough and ready, and again the camera won't pick it up at all, I doubt. Let me just turn the lights on at this end of the shop and see if that helps. It's probably going to make it worse actually, because there'll be a lot more reflection. Anyway, what I've done is I've gone down, I marked with a marker pen where the lines were, and I've actually gone in and scribed a line using my little Dremel and a burr, and then I've got my stamp set out, and I've actually gone in next to the lines and I've stamped in all the numbers on that top plate, and then given it a stone over to get rid of any high, you know, raised edges. So it all now, I can set it all up correctly. So we set it all up, and you can see there, this is the rope that drives the spindle, and this is where, when you pull this, it will go under the spring tension that keeps the rope tight so that it drives. So I got it all set up and just had a bit of a play, and this is sort of just a bit of a lump of steel that I found, and again my camera's just not going to focus on that, but that actually says John's Workshop on it, and it was just me having a bit of a play with the machine. The engraving's not very good at all. It's not regular, it just doesn't look neat or tidy. So I started investigating further, and I took the spindle unit out. So this is the Taylor. This is a Taylor Hobson unit, and basically your rope runs over the pulleys there. There's two pulleys, so you've got two speed options. But what was immediately apparent once I took this out, I managed to extract the bit that had been in there for a long time. So we got that out. But this thing's just rumbling and crunching and grinding, and it's just the slack in it, and it's just, yeah, it's not, it's past its best. In fact, it's no good. It's no good for the machine. So I've got a real issue now, because you can't buy these things anymore, or to the best of my research, I'm struggling to find anything. There's the odd one or two on eBay every now and again, but they're probably in a similar state to this. You know, they're 60, 70 years old, these things. So I'm really not sure what to do. There is a refurb service, and I've looked at the cost of having one of these things sent away and refurbed, and it's about 3 times the price of what I paid for the whole machine. So it doesn't make financial sense really to spend that sort of money at the moment, especially because I don't really plan using this thing very often. So it's all kind of at a standstill at the moment. But my thinking is, so if you look, and again, apologies for the handheld. If you look just here, this bore here is where that spindle sits. So it sits in through the bottom up there. So what I may do is turn a diameter eventually that's a good fit in here. It's just a plain bit of bar that will just sit in there nicely, but I'll turn it longer so that it sticks out the top by sort of 30mm, whatever, and out the bottom by the similar sort of distance, and then create 2 brackets. Again, once I've got the mill, I'll be able to do that much better, that move off to the back, and so I've got a bore in the size of this spindle diameter, and then another bore in the back, further back, as close to the head unit as I can get it, and then bore this second bore out on both plates to hold either a motor, a DC motor, or something similar. There's, you know, you can buy them online for engraving machines that it's basically a DC motor with an ER11 front end on it with collets. That's my kind of thinking. That's all doable. It would make a decent project as well to film, and it's probably the cheapest way of me putting this unit back to a condition where I can use it and get over the issue that I've got with the worn out spindle unit. So that's just a bit of an update really, guys, of what I've been doing. But it's nice to see the whole machine looking decent again. I've still got the bottom end to clean up, but that's just superficial. You know, it's the paintwork on the outside. All of the slideways and steel work and everything's all nice and clean. So that's a bit of an update on the engraving machine. You'll probably have seen at the back there, I've put my Allen key sets up on the wall. So gradually it's still starting to unpack things and get them screwed up onto the wall. So that's that. So I'll leave it at that point now, and I'll probably bring you back with a time lapse as we're doing the finishing the bench off. One more quick update, guys. I've out of the shed next door, I've dragged out piled under boxes and various other things my pallet truck. So that's sitting in here ready to go for when the mill arrives, just to get the thing into the garage, and then may end up having to use this in some form or another as part of the lifts. We'll see how we get on with the crane, but there might be bits of the build where I need some hydraulic lifting, and obviously the pallet truck can be used for that. So I'm going to need to look at some big lumps of timber, and I've got some breeze blocks and various other things that we'll be able to use to pack up on top of the tines, and gradually start lifting things up. We may need to do it that way. I may be able to use the crane, and all of that will become evident once we get everything in and I start planning the build. So that's in here ready to go, just in case when it's delivered it's pouring with rain. I'm ready to go now. We can just get the door open, get this thing outside, get underneath it, wheel it into the shop at least so it's out of the weather, and then at that point I'll do everything else on video and bring you along on that journey. Right guys, well I'm back at, I've just cut the steelwork off, roughly positioned it in place. I think this is where it's going to go. I'm just going to go for the one steel leg, which you can't see, apologies. Let me just pan down a bit so you can see what I'm doing. There you go. So there's one steel leg, 50 by 50 box section. Underneath there, running the full length of the bench, is a piece of angle iron that sits just on top of the 50 by 50 box. And then right down at the floor, and it's only loosely kicked in at the minute, is another piece of the angle iron there. So it's all at the right height. The bench is level at that, so I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the angle iron back, and I don't know whether you saw in the slow motion, I just took a measurement at the bottom there of 75mm from the front of the bench in to where the holes for the vise will need to go. So I'm going to drill two holes, pre-drilled two holes in the angle iron under here at the hole centres for the vise, and then I'm then going to weld all of this together. So I'm going to weld the box section to the angle iron, and I'm going to weld the angle iron piece at the bottom there to the bottom, centrally about the box section. I'll pre-drill two holes in the bottom piece of angle iron as well, so that I can bolt that to the floor. And then the idea being that when I bolt this vise to the bench, it bolts through the vise, through the timber, and through the angle iron piece underneath as well, just as a bit of extra. It won't need it because this bench top's, you know, very robust anyway, but it will just mean everything's really solid. So that's the plan. That's where the vise is going to go, and then I'll have the grinder sitting on here as well, and if there's room I might even pull the pillar drill round onto this portion of the bench as well. We'll see. So that's the plan. So the next thing I need to do is get the pigeon machine back out, and we'll clean this steel work up. I've got some holes to drill first, and then we'll get on with a bit of welding, just welding the angle iron top and bottom. And then what I'll finally do when I've got everything together, right underneath the main bench, so under in this corner where I've got the clamp at the minute, I'll weld the angle iron piece, so that's butted up to the angle iron of the main bench, and I'll just weld that angle iron to the main bench framework under there, and then that will make a very rigid addition to the bench. So I'm just going to stick the camera back on charge. It's about out of battery now, so but hopefully from where it's charging I'll stick it onto a time lapse, and you'll be able to follow along with what I'm doing. So just a quick tip, guys, for anybody who doesn't know, and for a situation like this, I need to know what the hole centres are for the vise to drill the holes through the steel work that's going to go under the bench. These holes are fairly irregular, you know, they're cast holes, they're not round holes. There's many different ways to get hole centres by different methods, but when the holes are irregular like they are in this, the best way I've always found to do it. It's very simple, and you need a vernier, and you use both sides of the vernier, the inside and the sort of inside and the outside versions of the vernier. So the easiest way is just to measure your extremities till you get your biggest result, and we've got 121.3. So I'm just going to write that on the whiteboard, which you won't be able to see, but and then you measure the smallest dimension, .75. Okay, and I'll just go up to the whiteboard, just bear with me a minute. Okay, so take 2 of the maths. We're just going to add these 2 numbers together now. So I've written down the widest and the narrowest points. Just going to add those together. Apologies you can't see. 7 and 3 is 10, 8 and 1 is 9 and 1 is 10, 9 and 2 is 11 and 1 is 12, and 2. So we've got 220.05, and then you divide that value by 2, which is going to give us 110.025. So we'll ignore the 0.025 based on the hole sizes, so it's 110mm hole centres. So I'm just going to go flip back to the device, and we'll just double check that with the vernier. So it's 110mm, so if we set that to 110, and that's bang on. So that's an easy way, a very simple way, especially when you've got irregular shaped holes like cast holes that aren't perfectly round. That's the easiest and best way of determining the hole centres. So I'll use that value to mark out the steelwork now, and I can drill the holes in the steelwork to accept the bolts underneath the bench. Guys, that's got the bench in place, and I've got the device bolted to it, which is obviously holding the top of the bench through to the framework underneath, and that was part of the idea really. And that's, I was thinking about putting some screws through the back here into the batten, but it really doesn't need it. It's absolutely solid, which is what I wanted. Space underneath for the shop vac, so I finally found a space for that to go, so that's sitting underneath the bench there now. The pillars bolted to the floor, so that's solid, and the beam underneath is welded to the bench, and I think I did a bit of time lapse of that as I was welding. So I've just loosely thrown the vise together, and tomorrow I shall come out, rebuild the vise fully, and also finish off the lathe tailstock Morse Taper attachment. So what I did off camera, and I did this in the week, I'll show you the bits and pieces. So there's this just piece of mild steel, black and mild steel with a tiny hole in each end. That's for a split pin. The idea behind that came with the saw, and that was the axle for the wheels to run on, which I'm never going to use. So we're going to cut this down to a shorter length. I've made this adapter, which is just a piece of unknownium. It was quite hard stuff. I don't know what it was, but it's just something I got in the scrapping. And I've drilled a clearance hole for a 5mm bolt straight through it. I've counterbored for a 5mm cap head at one end, and at the other end I've bored it out 10mm, which is the diameter of this bar. So that'll sit on there. It'll need threading in the end of here. The cap head will then go through and attach to there. That flat face on the top there, this diameter has been turned to fit just down the bore of the tailstock, so it's a good fit in the tailstock. So this flat face here is the face that will do the hammering on the back of the Morse Taper to eject it. And then at the other end I shall cut it to the right length, and I've got a black rubber ball that was part of the engraving machine that's never going to get used. So again, at that end, what I shall do is I'll sink that cap head properly into the ball, and then at the other end I shall bore that out 10mm, and I shall drill and tap the other end of this black piece of bar at the right length, and screw the ball on at that end, and then I shall have something that's nice to hold in the hand, and that will slide up the back of the tailstock and just eject the Morse Taper. So that's the idea behind that, and I'm just using what I've got, you know, rather than making anything special or buying anything in. I'm just using the bits and pieces. So that's a small job for tomorrow. So yeah, I'm pleased with the bench. It's looking good. It's given me a bit more room to the drill, because it's in this corner area now. There's a bit more access. The drill's easy to get to. Grinders up on the bench, vices at the bench that end. So it's coming together, and I'm pleased with just the general rigidity of that. That's just got no movement in it at all. It's absolutely solid. So that's gone well. So I'll bring you back tomorrow when we're finishing off the tailstock, Morse Taper remover, and just a bit more of a general tidy up. Well, that's the vise put back together, guys. That's all back together, and I've not, you know, it's had a paint, but you'll see some people that have done a thorough restoration and taken all the little marks out of it and polished everything up to the nth degree. This is a working vise, you know. I don't want to spend that length of time and effort on it and then not want to use it. So that's all been put back together. It's had a good oil up, good grease on the threads. It's all been cleaned. I've given the handle and the shaft end a bit of a wire brush just to get the worst of the rust off and oil up, so it's clean. And that's it, all fully operational and fixed to the bench, nice and tight. And you can see there the bench just doesn't matter what I do, the bench isn't moving anywhere. So that's what I wanted, something nice and strong. So that's that one done, and we'll focus in on the other one until such point as the mill arrives, I guess. Nice. Well, that's the Tailstock Morse Taper sleeve removal tool finished. It's not pretty, but it's just using the bits and pieces I've got laying around. So yeah, that's a good fit down the back of the tailstock there, and that removes the chuck nicely. So that's another job done. I'll just spin you around. I'll go the other end. So I think that'll be the end of this episode. It's gone on, it's quite a long episode actually. There's quite a lot that I've tried to cover. I think in future episodes I might try and split that down just to be a bit more focused. If anybody's interested, let me know in the comments. I'm going to start on that second vise, the second record vise, in terms of stripping, you know, bringing it back to base and then repainting and everything and rebuilding. If anybody would like just an episode just on that in more detail, rather than at the moment I'm kind of flitting around between many different jobs, so if you find that interesting, let me know. Obviously I'm still waiting for the mill, and when that arrives my attention's going to be suitably diverted at that point anyway, which you'd expect. So but let me know in the comments if you think that'll be a good idea, and I'll just do a video just purely on the vise sort of tear down, restoration and rebuild. So I think that's it for this episode. So the bench is done, tailstock removal tool's done, that's good. You know, the various other updates that I'm happy with, so we'll leave it there for this week. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, thank you to the new subscribers that have joined since last week, and I'll catch you on the next episode. So then you just add those two numbers together. I'll start again. Right, 5, that's 10, 8 and 1 is 9, plus 1 is 10, 9, 11. So we've got 210.05, and then you divide that by 2, which is going to give you 100, 105, sorry, I'm really not prepared this very well, 105.05, so 105 millimetres basically. So that's the hole centre size based on those holes. So very simple. Measure the longest. Well, it would be simple if you could do maths, which I obviously can't today. So you measure the outside that way, you measure the inside that way, add the two results together, divide them by 2, and that will give you the perfect hole centres regardless of what shape and sizes the holes are. So I'm just going to double check that, 105 millimetres. So if I set my vernier to 105, and we'll just check that that looks correct. It doesn't look correct. I'm going to film all of that again, and I'll probably put that in the bloopers.